Hello, I am Maddie Dalrymple, and welcome to From Expertise to Authority, where I talk with people who have succeeded in building their professional presence for a sideline or second act. And you can find out more at theindieauthor.com/authority, and that's indie with a Y, where you will also find links to all the episodes of the From Expertise to Authority podcast, my Substack, my YouTube channel, and a downloadable worksheet you can use to track your own journey. And today, my guest is Phil Marshall. Hey, Phil, how are you doing?
Hi, Maddie. Great to be with you.
It is lovely to have you here. And to give everyone a little bit of background on you, Phil Marshall is a physician, scientist, and AI entrepreneur with an insatiable curiosity about our universe. Taming the Perilous Skies is his debut novel, showcasing his passion for how science and invention can transform our lives and how they can go terribly wrong. And so, Phil, as I've been talking with some people for the podcast, I think there are sort of two categories of people I encounter who are interested in this from expertise to authority concept. And one is people who have spent their whole career, building a professional, building expertise, and they're looking to extend that maybe into retirement. And then there are people who see an opportunity to do something that on the surface seems seemingly completely different. And I think you fall into that second one with the emphasis on seemingly. I wanted to start out by asking you, what was your first or main career where you developed your expertise?
Sure. Yeah. I was trained in general surgery. I graduated Indiana University School of Medicine. I'm actually visiting in Indiana right now. And then I went to Portland, Oregon for surgery residency. And then I guess I must be a technology entrepreneur at heart because I switched to technology and have been in technology ever since. And then, so that's the story of the original career. That's the original career answer right there.
And can you talk a little bit about how the technology intersected with the medical profession?
Well, it's interesting. Could I have been entrepreneurial? Could I have tickled the entrepreneurial itch while staying as a surgeon? Potentially. I mean, you can certainly innovate within that field. There's a lot of innovation to be had in that field. But the internet, remember, this was 96, 98. Okay. So the last millennia, as I like to say. And so at the turn of the millennia. And and the internet was becoming huge. I mean, listen, 94, 96, 98. That was the hockey stick of the internet. And I knew what that was going to do to transform the patient, the patient's own knowledge, advocacy, and being an equal partner in their care. I knew it would transform the healthcare landscape. I regret that after this many years and another quarter century that healthcare hasn't been transformed more favorably. And so I'm sorry, everybody, I didn't do a better job of this, but I ended up joining a small company that was acquired by WebMD and was head of product for WebMD Health Services for many years, and then went on to, this and that. I'm not a big company guy, apparently, because I didn't thrive there. But then I founded Conversa, which is the top conversational AI system in healthcare, deeply clinical and personalized conversations between patients and their doctors. And so I created that technology. I invented the personalization system, which is called a knowledge graph system underneath. So it's fancy. And so we sold that in 2021, and that's when I left to go finish Taming the Perilous Skies, my debut novel. So then that became a different angle on entrepreneurialism for me, which we're trying to wrestle to the ground as we speak.
I don't know if this is a third flavor of what I was talking about before or just a subcategory of one of the other ones of that idea of taking an aspect of one's longstanding professional expertise and then marrying it with something which is really more of a passion project. And, the idea of offering AI assisted narration, AI generated narration for books outside the medical profession is a really nice way to see those two things married together.
Yeah, well, yeah, my journey there is when I was going through some really fantastic workshops in honing my craft. I went to Taos Toolbox with Nancy Kress and Walter John Williams and 18 of us students, some who've got some major success. One, Shin Tao just published Poet Empress, her debut novel, and she just got a monster deal with that. I mean, it just, is fantastic. So I'm very, very happy for her. And Jasmine Kirkbride just debuted her novel, The Forest at the Edge of Time. And then TK Rex, one of my one of my co-students there is publishing an anthology, I think this month. And so they're having some great success there. But the thing that I sort of discovered, because there were a couple folks there that really inspired this thinking, I'm an audio only reader. And so I created this story for the second week of Taos Toolbox that was 6 characters, different accents, Russian man and his daughter, a gay couple from the US, an elderly Norwegian woman, and the main guy who is feigning a British accent until he comes clean as being from Bakersfield, California. And I wanted to bring that little story to life. It's called Kill Your Darlings. And so I discovered 11 Labs and was blown away by the potential. And I realized the potential for creating great multi-voice projects at a fraction of what it would. That is completely inaccessible to mere mortals. You know, you can only imagine what it cost to put that Harry Potter full cast audiobook out recently. I don't know. I shudder to think. And so what we did was, I founded SpokenTo to really transform that landscape to allow the multi-voice, the vivid multi-voice work to come to life at a fraction of the cost and under the workflow control of the author directly, which just changes everything.
Well, I'm realizing a theme here is that I'm going to be drawing out lessons that I think our listeners who are interested in moving from expertise to authority can learn. Is that idea that obviously, you went through rigorous training to become a medical professional, but then it's almost like you also did equally rigorous training for yourself to capitalize on the passion project, fiction work. And so it wasn't like you figured, well, I spent all this time studying to be a doctor, but I can just jump in and be a writer and I'm sure it'll all be natural. So that idea of doing the Taos Toolbox, I think, is a great example of making a curriculum for yourself that enabled you to pursue that successfully.
It's a really interesting topic, your whole from getting to a point of authority on something. And it's making me think right now. I mean, you're right about the medical profession, certainly surgery being sort of the preeminent example of needing training, right?
Yeah.
And yet, there's other areas that can be self-taught. There's other areas, especially now with the tools that exist, where you can become, quickly, you can answer questions. You can answer the questions that you need to answer without having to go through that kind of multi-year process. One of the best examples I have is, not just writing and workshops and honing the craft, which, by the way, can I just say, okay, so here's my debut work. Okay. Right.
Yay!
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the advanced reader copy because yikes, actual NASA physicist at the top is missing a quotation mark. So I know that's my advanced reader copy. But in going through that, I really dedicated myself to craft and all that. But after all these years, because I'm self-published, right? I queried 120 agents on this work and got 0 full requests. And I even had the latest debut author from Tor write my query letter, like review and rewrite my query letter. So it's not like, okay, it was a bad query, whatever. No, it just was a, cold hand of life, I guess, whatever, the calloused heel of the universe. And so here I am self-publishing. I'm an indie author. And it is tough because, I didn't go through a full editorial review recently, and I should have. And yesterday I found a major error in one of my numbers at a critical point in the novel. I'm getting ready to deploy the audiobook both in human narration and on spoken with 100 voices, one for each speaking character.
Wow.
And I found an error yesterday in the numbers, and like a major, sort of penultimate error, and so it happens, I mean, you just have to keep pushing. And one other example. So even when you think you have authority, right, you're going to find that you screw up. I guess that's the lesson there. The other thing, though, is you made a little almost misstatement at the beginning because you said physicist instead of physician. Now, that's interesting because in 2001, I actually derived my theory of persistence, which is a unified theory that connects gravitational physics with quantum physics. And that's actually at the heart of my storytelling. That universe where that theory may be true, which, by the way, it may be, that holds and actually leads to some really interesting scenarios. Like we potentially could glimpse the future technically, mechanically, we could potentially glimpse the future. And so what happens if somebody tries to do that? That's not much of a spoiler in my book, but that is at the center of the story. And so when you said physicist, I kind of smiled because I say I'm an armchair physicist, right? There is an area that people train for decades and decades. And a lot of people think, well, if you're not a physicist and you don't have a lab and you don't have formal training, then you have no authority. Wrong. And I'm going to counter that right now. That each and every one of your listeners, you and me, Maddie, we sit in a universe where if we're not curious and fascinated about that universe, then you should be, because some things about it are just nuts, like crazy, and how things actually behave, what we've actually observed, and things we haven't observed, right? Oh, well, there's dark matter there. Are you sure? You sure about that? Because we haven't found it yet. And so, and so the truth is that when it comes to authority over some things, if you have interest and you can read up and level up to a certain degree, you're fully empowered to go and tell stories. You don't have to listen. I think, especially when it comes to something we all share, our health, the universe, we all have that in common. And so for me, people have called me crackpot, nut job, right? He was inspired by 9/11. No, I was inspired on 9/11 by a magazine article I read on that day. But what I mean, how people are on Reddit. And so but the point is that to be an authority in certain things, like even physics, you can be an authority on that to the extent that you need to be, because you have some shared passion, knowledge, or interest. And we all should when it comes to that topic.
Well, I really like that idea of thinking about how you want to apply your authority, who the audience is, what they're expecting, because I don't think anyone who reads a fiction novel necessarily assumes that, to use a really common example, if someone's reading a police procedural, they don't necessarily assume that the author was a police officer or a detective, or, they understand that many authors learned that by doing research, by speaking to people who did that and things like that. And the idea of this is a terribly boring example in comparison, but one of the things when I was thinking about ways people demonstrate their authority, I thought articles, I thought books, I thought speaking, I thought consulting, podcasting as a host or guest. And those are all things that I myself have not only done, but in many cases written a book about. So I feel very comfortable talking about those. The one thing that is another way I can imagine people pursuing authority is courses, which I've never done. I've never put up a series of courses that I manage myself just because it doesn't interest me. The logistics of it aren't appealing to me, but I still feel like I know enough that if somebody said, well, what about courses? I could say, well, here are some considerations. And now, if you really want to know more information than that, here's another person you can go to. And so understanding the value you can bring, whether that's practical value like information about courses, or sort of inspirational entertainment value, like you're talking about with this exploration of scientific concepts. It shouldn't be like a bar of authority. It should be like the spectrum of authority, maybe.
I think, one thing I haven't really done, I haven't yet done really, I put my book out in September, but trying to find the audience for that, at times I've found the audience for that, but then it kind of falters off. And so now with the audiobook, we're going to have another bite at the apple on finding that exact audience. And I keep honing the book, like fixing that damn error that I found yesterday, which I just, oh, come on, really? After all this time? I mean, anyway, whatever. There are benefits to traditional publishing, and that is a professional editor who's on the hook for making sure it's right.
I'll also mention that you tapped into that contact that you had at tour. So, you were taking advantage of people in all sorts of aspects of your life to help you proceed toward your goal.
Oh, yeah. Well, not only did she help me write the query letter, but her editor, the top editor in all of sci-fi, had requested my manuscript. I put that in the query letter. I got no full requests even after I said the top editor in sci-fi has asked for my manuscript.
Yeah.
So you talk about the calloused heel of the universe here. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm not bitter about it. Does it sound like bitter? Because I'm not bitter.
Well, I have a whole presentation where I compare trad and indie and discuss all the acknowledged benefit. There are good things about both, and I try to acknowledge both of them, but that the odds are against you. There are, let's say a publisher has 10 slots and they're going to get 1,000 submissions, and 100 of those submissions are going to be fantastic. And guess what? Only 10% of those are going to get a yes. So
Yeah, I don't know what the real answer is, but yeah, you just have to. I mean, back on just the idea of expertise, I think that what I was going to say in finding your audience is, are you bringing a topic and a level of research and a level of background that sort of tees up a key question or idea in a way that reader is going to find fascinating. Have you done your work? See, okay, so you can go to extremes here. Okay, let me give you an example. In my book, it's the year 2076, and at the core of the problem is how data is encrypted to send trajectory information to all of the aerials. These are anti-gravity vehicles where anti-gravity has been invented, and we live about a third of our lives up. And so there are billions of people up at any given time. When crisis hits in 2076, that's what the scenario is. But that encryption system is a quantum encryption system that I decided to leverage. And so it's called quantum key distribution, or QKD. And so there's a protocol there called BB84. Now, I decided to stay within the actual, protocol and all of the things about it that are actually true. And so that was harrowing, that kind of research. But I didn't, in hindsight, I didn't need to go to that level. I could have told the story. There is this system, and so you can choose your battles. I went all the way in. I mean, I went neck deep on that one. And I think I got it right. I think even physicists, I had actually one of my first reviewers was an MIT grad physicist, and she just really, really loved the book and found all the science to be compelling and accurate and all that. And that sent me over the moon. But then I also get called a crackpot and a nut job. But the thing is that where's your reader at? That's the part that I had not mastered, and still to this point today, as I sit here today, I have not mastered. And that is making sure that you're teeing those things up in the way that reader's like, huh. And so Isabel Knight is somebody who I think, and I've worked with, and she's helped me to hone, like, what is that? And I'm like, yeah, it's our shared interest in the universe. And a question that kind of comes up is, what if we actually could glimpse the future? What would it mean? What could happen?
Yeah.
And that's a lot more general audience kind of appeal. That's like, and I write in the style of Dan Brown as far as these like thrillers that sort of unfold, and all that. And so he appeals to a broad, audience. Like what if, the descendants of Christ are walking the earth and they're being protected by a cabal, a secret cabal. And it's like, that is interesting. And so what if we could glimpse the future, like technically, mechanically glimpse the future? That is interesting. And so I hope that someday my work will find that. But the point is, authority, I went well beyond probably where I needed to go on it, but I sure tried.
I think that the theme I'm hearing from our conversation related to authority is this idea of, even in some of the articles I've written so far, I position authority as kind of like a stage you achieve. You gather your expertise and then you go through the process of letting people know about that expertise and then you achieve authority. But this idea that you can weave together all sorts of different parts of your professional career, your passion, and where those things overlap, and you can put something out in the world that doesn't necessarily position you as an authority, but, scratches a different kind of itch in your yen for interacting with those around you.
Yeah, that's right. And it kind of brings up an interesting story. When it comes to authority, I want to give you a couple of examples. So I have quantum key distribution. Okay. I'm not a quantum physicist. I have gravitational physics. I'm not a, gravitational, physicist or a cosmologist. And I have the biggest crisis ever to hit the world being handled by the Department of National Safety, which used to be the FBI. I don't know anything about how the federal government handles a major international crisis, right? And yet, a friend of mine is a encryption expert, okay? Another friend of mine from high school is one of the top FBI counterterrorism agents based at the CIA headquarters. And then another contact, which I had review my novel, is an actual NASA physicist. He was really something to work with, but that's another story. The point is that I just kept going until I found the level of expertise that I needed. But everybody now with deep research on ChatGPT or Gemini, I mean, you can level up to the extent that you need to drive your story forward, I think, very easily. I just happen to have a few fantastic contacts that really helped tremendously. If it's out there in the world somewhere, right, doing a standard Google search on that kind of thing, the truth is that deep research on Gemini and ChatGPT, they do a fantastic job of bringing that stuff back. So it's easier than ever, but it's still all about story. I mean, it has to be, something. I'm fortunate that because my works are all based on a novel theory and unified theory in physics, that there is no AI that would have come up with that.
Yeah. Um, so looping back to the authority concept, I feel like when I was thinking through who I wanted to talk to, and I thought, oh, Phil, because you've gone from made this seemingly very, in one way, disparate jump from a medical profession to a speculative fiction author, like
Hard
exactly how
sci-fi
people.
thriller is the way I describe.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Or you could say you've made what was less of a jump by going from the more technical side of your medical background to applying technology in a new format. So when you were thinking about authority in the context of thinking through a conversation for this conversation, how are you thinking of your authority in your own mind?
Oh, um, I, I fancy myself as a Renaissance man. I'm so multifaceted. I was thinking this morning that my mom was a tap dance teacher and I had a passion for music. But one thing I never learned was how to tap dance, and I don't know how to play the piano after several attempts of trying. And so I wish I could sort of list off all these, crazy things that I'm expert in that I never did. But some things I did do are technology and applying now technology to media and then the whole science thing and science fiction and the physics behind that. I think my own authority is just, I mean, first, just like everybody, you just have to be willing to just do it because it interests you and you're passionate about it. It all starts there. And no matter what it is that you write about, no matter what it is that you do, if you're bringing your own personal curiosity, and that's always staying ahead of your reader, right? You're just ahead of them on your own curiosity about that, then you're golden. And if you're skating into an area that is massively curious to a lot of people, and you're the first one that's kind of driven into that curiosity and teased it apart, that'll just be absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe this will end up being like the last chapter of my eventual From Expertise to Authority book, because I feel like a lesson from the conversation is that authority is one of many possible outcomes of expertise. And then that feels very goal driven. Like somebody wants to be established as an authority because they want to earn money from speaking engagements, or they want to write a book, or they want to stay connected with their colleagues, or whatever that might be. But then there's also this sort of more serendipitous, what do you do with your expertise, that says maybe what you want to do is not pursue authority. Maybe what you do is want to marry all the things that have happened in your life that have grabbed your passion and your interest, and find a way to continue those, to bring those together in a new way that might result in speaking engagements, that might result in staying connected with the people that you knew through your professional life, but not necessarily.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. This idea of expertise to authority. It's fascinating. Like authority, what am I authority in? Okay, I'm probably an authority on AI tech, and especially when it comes to creating multi-voice. I'm an authority on conversational AI in healthcare. I am not an authority on physics by most people's measure, but let me tell you something about authority. There's plenty of people out there who have authority on dark matter. What if it doesn't exist? What did it matter if you were an authority on something that was not real? So being an authority on something, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right thing or worthwhile. So I don't know. I mean, calling yourself an authority on something is a little bit sort of self-aggrandizing anyway. But I think that expertise in something to create a great story and be able to just be right in front of your readers on that curiosity because your passion is plowing the way for what they then realize is also their curiosity and their passion. Man, you're gonna be golden.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea of there are all sorts of good things for oneself and good things for those around you that you can do with the knowledge one gains through a lifetime. And authority is just one way that might play out, or maybe just fun is one way that that
Yeah,
plays out.
fun's a good start.
It's, well, as always, it was very fun talking to you, Phil. And please let everyone know where they can go to find out more about you and everything you are doing online.
Yeah, not hard to find me. I try to be out there, and once in a while, people trip on something about me. So just drphilmarshall.com, just like it sounds. Dr. Phil, like the other Dr. Phil, DRPHIL, Marshall.com. But Taming the Perilous Skies, you can just look that up and find me. And I'm an open book. And so anybody can ask me anything at any time. And so, yeah, thanks, Maddie. This was a lot of fun, as always.
Yes, very lovely. Thank you.